So today, using Capture One and Dehancer, I'm going to get a Cinestill 800T style vibe on some of my photographs that I've shot already. Sometimes I want my photos to look like they were shot on film, but I don't always want to shoot on film. So I achieve this look a few different ways. Sometimes I'll just use a film simulation recipe on one of my Fujifilm cameras. And depending on which model you have more adjustments and choices to make and tweaks to make to get a more dialed in look. But not all of those cameras have all the settings or all the options. And then you may be shooting other brands too. So in those situations when you don't have all these built-in adjustments that you can make in camera, or if you're shooting other brands, you need other options to get that film look or that analog vibe. So today I'm going to jump back into Dehancer and show you why that's one of the tools I like to use to get an analog vibe to some of my films, to some of my photographs. But specifically, I'm going for a Cinestill vibe, specifically Cinestill 800T, so the tungsten balanced Cinestill film. Now the cool thing is I can apply this approach to both stills and video. So I will do mostly stills in this video, but I'll show you real quick that Dehancer has a plugin for video apps as well, so you can apply some of these same principles to your video projects. So I'm going to hop on the computer and show you this process where I start in Capture One with a few adjustments and then send the photo to Dehancer to finish off this look. Okay, so I have Capture One open. This is what I use instead of Lightroom. I use Lightroom on occasion, but Capture One's my main cataloging and photo editing tool. The same principle applies perfectly to Lightroom. I use Capture One first to do a few key initial adjustments, and then I send the photo to Dehancer to finish it off, to use those specific tools in Dehancer to give it that look. So I have a handful of photos here in Capture One that I want to play around with. I'm not going to do all these in this video, but I'll pick a couple and show you the process. So first off, I'll find the image I want. This image of the Las Vegas sign was shot actually on an XT1, so the image profiles are very limited. On an XT2 file or something else, I would choose Provia in this drop-down menu, but I'll just leave it at auto for now. And then for white balance, regardless of what it was shot on, to really stay true to the Cinestill 800T vibe and spirit, I'm going to choose tungsten white balance, and I'm going to check the white balance from there. That's a little too harsh of a blue for me, so I'm going to pull it back just a little bit, so maybe a little bit closer to actually what you think of traditional tungsten white balance to be, 3200-ish. So I choose the picture profile, adjust the white balance, and the only other thing I would do in here, depending on the photo, is flatten the contrast just a little bit. Most of the time it's making sure that I have a little bit of headroom in the highlights if I can, if it's appropriate. For this picture it is, because the Las Vegas sign has some white in the main part of the surface. So I don't want to send that to Dehancer already blown out. I may end up blowing it out in Dehancer with bloom, but I want to send it to Dehancer with protected highlights. So I actually I'll hit reset so I can do this process. But so what it would have started out is like this. So what I probably would do is I'd pull down the highlights a little bit, keeping an eye on my histogram. And once it looks like my highlights are protected a bit, actually I'll go a little bit more. Then maybe I'll bump up the shadows a little bit. Just again, give myself a little bit of playroom in the shadows, just like I did with the highlights. So when I go to Dehancer, I can make some more drastic adjustments. So that's pretty much it for the Capture One process. Picture profile, white balance, flattening the contrast a little bit, protecting the highlights, and then now we can send it to Dehancer. Now Dehancer is a plugin that works, that does not open RAW files. It's not a RAW photo editor. So you can't open RAWs in it. You can send it, I think you can send it JPEGs, but definitely TIFF files. So by default, Capture One will send TIFF files when you're sending a photo out of Capture One into a plugin. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to choose Edit With, and then I have a list of plugins that come up in the drop-down menu. And I'm going to go all the way to the bottom and say Dehancer Lightroom plugin. I'm sure the process is very similar in Lightroom. I'll click on that, and then Capture One gives me some options to adjust the TIFF that it's going to create in order to send to Capture One. I don't need to change any of this. I'm fine with all these presets. And we will wait for Dehancer to open with that image that we just created. Now by default, it might choose either, it might have a look applied when you open Dehancer. It might default to a plugin, or in my case, it had last edits. So whatever last edits I did, I don't want to show you guys starting at that point. So I clicked original. So there's no adjustments now. And basically the first thing I will do, there's really no specific order that you have to stick with in Dehancer. That's the cool thing. But I will check the exposure on this image, and if I need to make any adjustments, I'll make an overall exposure adjustment under the source drop-down menu with exposure compensation. So what I'll do, I'll just drop down the exposure just a little bit more than what I brought it in at. So again, giving me more room to play with in a little bit, because the next tab I will go to is the expand tab, and this is where I can adjust the black point and the white point separately. So basically your shadows and highlights separately. What I'll do here, this picture doesn't need a lot of help in the shadows. It's pretty dark already, but I'll darken the shadows just a tad, just a little bit. So I just brought it up 0.30 on the number of the black point slider. Now we'll do the white point. So this is where I will probably start seeing what the whites or the highlights look like if I go to the extremes. So I'll start taking it all the way to the extremes and kind of see what the whites begin to look like as they become overexposed. And I don't want them too crazy, so I'll probably leave it. Actually, I'll probably start here, because when we go down to halation and bloom, it's going to add a little bit of that blown out, overexposed type vibe again. So we don't want to overdo it with multiple processes. I could go to film grain next. I'm going to say film grain for last. I'm going to go to halation now. Now, as soon as you click the checkbox to activate the halation option, you're going to start to see some results that might be subtle depending on the image that you have. So what we'll do to understand how it's affecting this is we'll crank up the amplify and the impact a little bit, and then we'll click this mask mode option, and this will this will show us the areas of the image that it's going to be affected by the halation. And when we're seeing this view of it, we can also adjust amplify and impact accordingly if we choose to. But I kind of feel like this image might work well with some relatively extreme settings on those two sliders. So we're going to leave them around that point. You notice I didn't really touch a lot of the other ones because Dehancer is one of those things, and this is like this for Capture One and other editing programs as well, is that there's a whole bunch of tools available to you, but that doesn't mean you have to go through each one and adjust each one. Just need to identify the ones you need, the important ones, and use those. So halation, and if you don't know what halation is, the easiest way to say it is to know what to look for. Usually it's in the highlights, and sometimes you get a red halo, a red aura around the bright whites. And you'll see in some other pictures, and you'll see, I'm sure you've seen online, where it's really exaggerated around streetlights or headlights, stuff like that. Okay, so now I clicked on the bloom option, and just like before, I'm going to click the mask mode to see the areas of the image that this is affecting. Now I'm going to go down to the impact slider and take this almost all the way up just to kind of see what the possibilities are. And same with amplify. That's probably too much, but it's almost, I don't know, almost kind of cool. I'm gonna pull the impact back a bit, and maybe pull amplify back a bit, and let's toggle this whole section on and off. So this is the bloom that I'm playing with. Again, turning this on and off, and you can kind of see the before and after. I feel like I can probably afford to go a little bit more on the halation, because what I'm looking at is this that star above the welcome. I kind of like what the halation does to that, so I want to make sure that it's affecting that. And around the circles on the welcome part, you can see some of the halation working well there. So I want to make sure I keep all that. Now I think for this specific photo, it's pretty simple. I think where I have halation and bloom, it works right now. Now the two final touches I would probably do is maybe look at what film grain would look like on this image. The default setting, as soon as I click it on, is too much for me. So I would take the size down dramatically. So I'm going to type in 0.25, and then take the amount down dramatically, down to like below 2, maybe 1.2. There, we're getting closer there. Now, let's see what else we can do here with the resolution. I'll take the resolution down about right there. Let's do before and after on the film grain. I feel like in this image, the film grain is really noticeable in the white part of the sign, actually. Let's see if we take that down a little bit. Not really affecting it there. I think we're actually probably good there. The last thing I feel like I want to do is maybe just see what it looks like if we take the contrast a little more extreme again. So take the darks really dark and bring up the whites even a little bit more. It's kind of cool. Now this is one of those situations where if I look at this tomorrow, I may think it's overdone. But let's look at the complete before and after as far as Dehancer goes. So what we brought in Dehancer looked like this, and after Dehancer we're at this. So some of this effect is by contrast adjustment, which you can get in any editing program. But some of the finishing touches are that halation, bloom, and film grain. And that's what I really love about Dehancer are the adjustments and the settings for those three options. And that's one of the things that sets it apart from just Capture One, Lightroom, or Photoshop by themselves, is that it has those options available. Now, so I'm done in Dehancer. I click OK. Now, what's going to happen is that a brand new TIFF file will be in my Capture One catalog with those edits. So there is the edited version of the Las Vegas sign that I took to Dehancer to edit. Let's find another photo to work on. Let's see here. Let's do this photo since there's a few people in the photo, and that fabulous Las Vegas jewelry and gift sign has a few different colors in the lights. You have the purple, the red, or reddish orange, and you have the little bulbs around the edge. And we have other lights in the background that will be affected by the halation and bloom differently. So that's the cool thing, is that all these lights in the photo, of a photo like this, will be affected slightly differently. So again, let's actually reset everything and let's start this photo. I shot this photo in black and white. So what I do first is take it from black and white to a color profile. For Fujifilm, I'll just reset to Provia, which is the standard color profile for a Fujifilm camera. That's my first step. Second step is I'll choose the white balance. Since I'm going with the Cinestill 800T Vibe, I'll choose tungsten. And let's see how tungsten looks like on this photo. That actually looks pretty good. So I think I might leave it with the default tungsten preset. And the next thing I'll do before we go to Dehancer is soften the contrast a little bit to give us some headroom in Dehancer to play with to increase the contrast if we want to in Dehancer itself. So we don't want that baked in when we send it to Dehancer. So because we're not sending a raw file to Dehancer, we're sending a TIFF file that Capture One is creating based on our initial settings. So I'm going to bring the highlights down. In this specific photo, what I'm paying attention to is these lights around the edges here. I don't think there's really not a lot of detail to recover. So it's not like I'm not doing a ton, but by the time I get to about there, that's about as much detail as I'm gonna recover in those highlights there. And then as far as shadows go, I mean, if I want to see some detail in this guy's chair and his face, then I'll pull that up a little bit. I get a little more detail there. Beyond that, there's no other really shadow areas that I'm super concerned about. Yeah, beyond that, I think this photo might be ready. Okay, so we'll send this to Dehancer with Edit With. Find the Dehancer plugin in the drop-down menu. Click OK, and then wait for Dehancer to open this TIFF file that we just created. I don't want the last edits I did. I want to reset it to original so we have a fresh start. And again, I'll start at the top with having another opportunity to check my exposure. I think we're probably good with this photo with exposure for now. I don't really need to mess with the source tab yet. So that was for exposure. Now expand is the area where I will add some contrast. I'll add a little bit, and then we'll add more after we add halation and bloom. So I'll just increase the darkness of the blacks a little bit, and we will increase the highlights a little bit. Maybe too much. Let's start there. We'll come back to those after halation, bloom, and film grain to see what can be used after the fact to finish it off to make it look, perfect. So let's click halation on, and there was some change already. I can see it in some of those highlights, but let's see what else we can get. So I'm going to click the mask mode and see there's actually a lot of areas in this image that are being affected by halation subtly. Let's click let's see how much more we can affect if we take the slider all the way up to 100. Decent amount. Let's keep it like at 85 for now. Let's take amplify all the way up. With amplify up to like 96, it actually doesn't feel too crazy. It doesn't feel too overblown. It actually feels we're already getting close to that. Like it looks like it was shot on Cinestill. Because if you've seen some of the Cinestill photos, that sometimes they do have extreme bloom and halation on some highlights. Sometimes too much for my taste. So that's the beautiful thing about this, is you can really dial it in to what you like. I think for halation, we're probably good for now. Actually, let's see here. All right, so let's go to bloom. I'll click on bloom, and we will see what we're working with here with the mask mode. So not a ton is being affected by bloom until we bring the slider up, and now we're starting to see more areas be affected. The amplify adjustment is affecting it, but not quite what I want. So maybe we do need to dial back impact a little bit on this. I'm looking at a few different areas here. So I'm looking at the glow kind of around and below the sign, and on the edge of some of these people here. Actually, there's kind of just an overall fogginess that it creates because of all the lights that are in here. But it's kind of cool. And just like every one of these adjustments, just like a lot of photo editing, it's really up to your preference and your taste. I like that. I think let's leave halation and bloom for now. Let's put some film grain in here and see where we're at. I'm going to take the amount down really low like we did the other one. Take the size down really low, because a lot of times the film grain subtlety is, subtle is really what you want. Now the last thing I will do after film grain is give my contrast adjustment another pass, and this I'll do I do this in the expand tab. Let's take the black point kind of far and then dial it back so we see what areas are affected. So that's pretty good. Let's take the white point up a little bit. Well, that's kind of cool. I kind of like that. But maybe the only thing I'm thinking is that I wonder if our saturation in this image is it too much? Do we need to work on that? And if I do need to adjust saturation in here, there's a module called print, and you don't have to worry about everything else, but I can pull back the saturation just a little bit if I decide that I need to. Let's see here. That might work. I feel like just that little pullback on saturation gives it a little bit of the analog vibe. So let's do a before and after of the whole edit. This is before Dehancer, and this is after. Pay attention to the highlights, all the lights, all around the image, from the Walgreens on the very edge of the right to the bulbs on the sign. All the before and after, before Dehancer, after, and that looks pretty cool. So I'll click OK, and it will send that new TIFF with our edits back to Dehancer, and from there we're ready to print, we're ready to share on social or whatever. Okay, so this is the photo I'm going to work on next. Again, this is another one of those photos where I shot using a black and white profile on my Fujifilm camera. So Capture One by default treats that as the way this image is supposed to look, as the way I shot it. Capture One respects that and presents it that way. But thankfully, I can change my mind and say, okay, I don't want this black and white anymore. I want to work with color. I want to take it to Dehancer and make it look like I shot it on film, Cinestill film. So my first step is choosing a different color profile. I'll choose Fujifilm Pro Via Standard. If you have a different camera brand, choose standard, default, whatever standard color profile that you like. And then the next step would be adjusting the white balance. Now, you don't always need to adjust the white balance. If you shot in a way that you like it, or if you shot tungsten or tungsten balanced or something like that, you may be already close to that. This was shot similarly close to that, so let's just see where we're at. If I click tungsten, okay, it's not too drastic, but I do kind of like. Let's see here. I'll leave it a little bit warmer than standard, a little bit warmer than Capture One's standard tungsten temperature balance. Tungsten technically is 3200 Kelvin. That's what is the accepted white balance measurement of tungsten. But Capture One is a little cooler than that, so I pulled it up just a little warmer. So color profile and white balance are done. The next thing I'll check is if I need to flatten contrast just a little bit to give us more working room and Dehancer. So first thing I want to do is pull down the highlights, because most of the time this is the key area that I need to keep an eye on, so I have working room in Dehancer. And that looks pretty good. Let's see what we can do with the shadows. Now this doesn't have a lot of dark areas, but I think we do benefit from bringing up the shadows a little bit from the surrounding wall of that window. I'll do that. I'll take down overall exposure just a tiny bit, and I think we're ready to go to Dehancer. So let's go edit with Dehancer Lightroom plugin. Click OK in that, just basically accepting all the presets that are set for Capture One's TIFF file creation. And again, I don't want my last edits. I want to click original, reset it so I have a fresh start. And I will go to source if I need to adjust exposure yet one more time. I don't think I do right now, so we will revisit that later if we need to. But let's start adding contrast back in. And the reason I don't like to send it to Dehancer with this contrast baked in is that you do have last chance to change your mind, a last chance to adjust right here. So you can't send a raw file to Dehancer, but you can send something that's a little more pliable, something you can work a little bit more with. So that's pretty good starting point for contrast. We'll revisit contrast again after halation, bloom, and film grain. I'll start with halation. And let's click the mask mode and see what we're working with here. There's not a lot of areas being affected by halation, so this might not be a perfect example for halation on this image. But we're still going to add it because even if it's subtle, it's there. It adds to the vibe, the film-like vibe, subtly if nothing else. Let's try bloom. I'll click on the bloom option. And the bloom is doing some stuff. I already see it. But let's see here. Wow, actually the bloom is not super strong. It is affecting some areas, but not super strong. But let's still see it without the mask mode on. So there's bloom off and bloom on. It's definitely working. Let's do a little bit more amplify. Okay, so that's with no halation and bloom, and then bloom and halation turned on. It might be a little extreme, but I don't know, I kind of like it. Let's add some film grain, and after film grain, we will go back and adjust contrast again. Now let's adjust contrast. Let's take the dark down. Cool kind of effect that I kind of like, and I don't know if I'm going to try to emphasize it more, is that you have this tungsten color vibe outside this store, but within the store itself, within this window, you have more yellowish vibe, a goldish vibe, and I like that contrast of color. Let's see if we can emphasize that a little bit more. So let's see here. So what I did is just I'm taking this opportunity to adjust basically white balance yet again and Dehancer. So we started with tungsten. I feel like I want to take it away from tungsten just a little bit, just to emphasize that the lights inside that store there. I kind of like that. Now we're probably close to being done with this image. Sometimes I'll add a vignette, but not always. But this image, I feel like this image would work well with a vignette. Now I think this starts to really get the vibe of a Cinestill image. I feel like, and it helped to blow out some of those lights with a little bit of halation and lots of bloom. Let's see it before and after this whole image. So that's what we started with before we went to Dehancer, and then that is our Dehancer edits. I think that's pretty cool. Click OK, and now our edited TIFF file is back in Capture One. You can make some fine-tuned edits on this TIFF file in Capture One as well, and obviously you can print this to do whatever else you would do to a photo. That's pretty cool. I like that one. So as far as still images go, that's kind of the process that I like to use to get this Cinestill vibe. I start in Capture One, but you could start in Lightroom. I simplify or take the color profile back to a default to a standard base. I adjust the white balance, usually starting with a tungsten white balance between 3000 and 3200 or so. Once I have that, then I go and adjust the exposure and contrast. I flatten the contrast a little bit so I can do all those adjustments in Dehancer after I do halation, bloom, and film grain. Because once those are done, I really get I really get an idea of how much contrast I'm going to need to finish it off, to make it look exactly how I want it to look. Now, real quick, I will close Capture One and we'll hop into Resolve and just show you how this can also be applied to some video as well. Okay, the last thing I want to show you just real quick is kind of show you not necessarily the process, because the process has a similar spirit as I did before with photos. It's a similar idea with video, although the video settings and adjustments in the Dehancer plugin are slightly different, but a lot of the same stuff is there. You have, you have exposure compensation. You have the expand tab to adjust contrast. You have film grain, halation, and bloom. So all those things we had before are there. There are a couple extras that are there. There's film damage and other film-like effects to make your footage look like film. I had a handful of clips in here that I shot a few years ago, and I'll just show you kind of what I was able to get with a few adjustments on them. The cool thing is these were all, well, not all of them, but at least 2 or 3 of these clips were just iPhone shots, iPhone 7 or iPhone, I don't even know, it may have been iPhone 7 back in those days. But with some of these adjustments with the Dehancer plugin, I can get a really cool look. So I'll do a full screen here. This is, again, just from an iPhone 7, just some shots of the El Cortez sign that I take a lot of shots of. And if I click the after with the Dehancer plugin on, you see the same idea that I was doing on my still images now applied to video. Halation, bloom, film grain, some tweaked contrast. You're really getting, this is exaggerated for sure, but it's not too crazy. I kind of like that. I could see me using this in some project, some video or some film for sure. Now, if I'm thinking about this analytically, I would think I'd probably pull back the saturation a little bit, but obviously we're already in Resolve. We have all the color and image related tools at our disposal, but there are also some simple editing tools in the Dehancer plugin to tweak the image without layering a whole bunch of more nodes on your grade if you don't want to. This is the contrast sliders that I was using, black and white point. There is a starting film profile that you can choose. I chose Kodak Vision 500T for this video sample, but you go to a drop down menu and there's a whole bunch of choices. And just like with the print version, you have halation and bloom. The adjustments are different. You have what halation might look like on 8mm, 16 and 35 and 70mm film, and the same with bloom. Bloom as it would look on 8, 16, 35 and 70mm film, and you can bounce between each and mix and match and see what works for you. But I think, like, for me, the biggest one of the biggest things that I thought was really cool is just being able to take the standard iPhone video that's pretty solid, but to just give it some cool analog flavor. And that's with halation and bloom that's affecting all those all the neon lights. Some of the halation and bloom is also wrapping around some of the people when they get in front of the lights, which is super cool. And then obviously the film grain adds some texture to it. So you can adjust all these to taste and dial in exactly what you want. And this is another example, not so much necessarily just the bright lights, but also the colors on those wind chimes are affected subtly, but are affected by the halation and bloom settings. So that's how I get a Cinestill vibe to my photographs. So I invite you guys to use my discount code in the description to get a discount off Dehancer. I am a Dehancer affiliate, so I receive any portion of any purchase made with that discount code, but purchase it however you wish, and if you have other plugins that do the same thing, that's awesome too. These principles, this approach can be applied to other plugins as well. So I'm sure there are other plugins out there that have bloom, halation, and film grain, which are the 3 components that I rely heavily on in this specific process. So let me know if you try Dehancer, and also let me know if you have another plugin that kind of gives you the same workflow. So that's it for now, guys. I appreciate every one of you as always, and I'll talk to you soon.